Welcome into the PFF NFL show. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. Where's Mike? Is he still in the Yukon?
Still in the Yukon.
Yeah, that's going to be for a while. He's going to be stuck there for a little while, I think. So we're going to pick up the reins. We're going to pick up the slack with Mike moving on. We hope you guys caught our last show. We went through all of the individual players, the big-name players that signed, and the implications for their teams and what we think of all those guys. So go ahead and check that out if you already haven't. Today we'll talk more teams.
Yeah.
Team-centric. Any team that you think is winning. We have to talk winners and losers when it comes to free agency, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the winners are the teams that just do nothing, but that doesn't make for a good show.
Winning the offseason. That's what it's all about. I really like what the Rams did between the trades, bringing in Marcus Peters, getting in another corner and Aqib Talib, a guy who himself is, that is, as well as bringing back LaMarcus Joyner and their slot guy, Nickel Roby-Coleman, that is a really good secondary on paper.
It is. First off, if you guys haven't been to ProFootballFocus.com and read the piece that two of our analytics guys did, George Shahuri and Eric Eager. I've been hanging out with George a lot more, so I'm getting the name down. If you haven't read the piece that they wrote, it's it's part of your PFF Edge subscription, so you guys have to have signed up for it. But it does a fantastic job of laying out the value of a slot corner these days, and we're seeing money being thrown at these guys left and right. But when you look at Roby-Coleman being a pretty solid slot guy, Joyner at free safety, and like you said, Peters and Talib, that is a fantastic-looking secondary for Wade Phillips.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that article is it goes beyond the idea that these guys are now playing two-thirds of the snaps, therefore they're just more valuable than they used to be.
It's like, so, what does it mean play-by-play, right?
Yeah, people have talked for a long time now that slot defensive back, slot or nickel players, guys that play in sub packages, have become significantly more valuable because teams are playing significantly more sub package defense. So that's been a trend that's been going on for years, but they dived into that expected points added stuff, the EPA, how valuable things are on a play-by-play level, and actually looked at slot receivers or slot corners as opposed to perimeter corners. And said, actually, when you look at what's going on, that position itself is inherently as valuable, or if not more valuable, than perimeter players. So when we've been talking about guys like Minkah Fitzpatrick and Derwin James, and whether those guys with their athletic skill set can move outside and play perimeter corner the way Jalen Ramsey did, maybe that's not the right way to look at it. Maybe
we might be asking the wrong question, is what they presented that as an argument.
Yeah.
Is Steve, Sam, and everybody else, are they asking the wrong question there?
Maybe the best value for those players is actually where they are right now, inside in the slot, becoming that Tyrann Mathieu kind of wrecking machine as a slot weapon. That's where they're actually more valuable than transitioning them, even if they become, top flight number one corner like Jalen Ramsey. So that is a great piece to go and look out for.
Yeah, so it's not only the value, right, because essentially it's more valuable to throw to the slot in general in the NFL, but also the consistency of it. So they went back through our grades and they said, and they defined everybody as either an outside corner or a slot corner based off of alignments. And the slot corners, their grades year to year were much more consistent than the outside guys. And, essentially what they concluded off that is that the slot is this very distinct skill set that you do need specific types of guys to do that. So definitely a fascinating piece that I think opens up a lot of different ways of looking at things.
And where that's really interesting is, so one, I thought the best point in that entire article was talking about guys like Fitzpatrick, who was essentially learned to play this position all the way along.
Right.
You're not moving a guy into the slot because he has that skill set and then seeing what he can do. You're taking a guy who has already learned in that skill set, and you can see that he's a top slot player. So he should immediately be able to do that in the NFL. It becomes really interesting because when we go through all these cornerbacks at draft time, and basically anybody that's 5'10", the NFL says, well, he's a slot corner now.
Right. It's an afterthought.
Yeah.
It's a push him.
It's just like a physical barometer. If this guy has a specific physical body type, he's too small to play outside, so we're going to take him and move him inside where that skill set is better. But if that guy has never played inside, which is the case for a lot of these cornerbacks, they've only ever been perimeter corners, but because of their size, the NFL is just automatically moving them inside the slot. It's not that simple, because it is a completely different skill set. You can't just take a guy who has only ever played as a perimeter corner, move him inside because he's a smaller body and say, that'll work.
As opposed to specifically looking for the skill set that fits there and working from that perspective.
So it makes those guys more valuable because they have the experience inside and that skill set. But it also raises the question of, trying to identify these guys that actually have that experience and whether the college game will ever start sort of doing what the NFL wants it, which is always the big motivating factor in all this draft stuff.
Right.
It would be really useful for the NFL if college would start using these smaller guys in the slot already so that by the time they hit the NFL, they know they've got experience in there and there isn't this giant adjustment period.
It's important for college to just put guys in the position they're going to be in the NFL so we can easily evaluate.
So we don't have to do anything about it. We just move them straight there.
Sorry, we went off the rails, but I do think that piece, I honestly think it's a game changer in the football world. I honestly think it's something that general managers and teams, really need to be reading and studying. And the work that George and Eric are doing has been fantastic. Be sure to go check them out. They are running the newest PFF podcast called the PFF Forecast. Go check that out, FORE cast. Go check that out wherever you guys are listening to us, whatever podcast provider. Subscribe to it, listen to it. It's great. We're trying to get that thing off the ground. They do a fantastic job. This all started discussing
the Rams.
Yeah. And are we at a point right now? Wade Phillips coached the no-fly zone over in Denver, and that's Chris Harris and Talib and Bradley Roby's out there. So they had all these great corners over there. Are they building an even better version of that here in Los Angeles, which, oh, by the way, has the best football player in the NFL on that defensive front in Aaron Donald, much like Denver had a top 3 to 5 player in the NFL in Von Miller. So some similarities here.
Definitely, yeah. That defense is starting to look scary from a personnel standpoint, and they also got rid of some weak link. They shipped off Alec Ogletree, who's an athletic guy, but has never translated that to actually being good, particularly when it comes to coverage, which has, again, become more important than ever before. So you ship off Alec Ogletree, you bring in all these guys. The other thing about the Marcus Peters, Aqib Talib thing is that both those guys are kind of dynamic ball hawk type corners.
Oh, yeah.
Not only will they be pretty good at shutting down receivers, but they could generate a ridiculous volume of turnovers, and they're capable of going on that kind of run where you just destroy opposition offenses because they're racking up a huge number of interceptions in the space of a few games.
I don't want to discuss Marcus Peters and his ability to make plays when he's not even targeted, because we've done it a million times. I am just curious to see if that was something that was inherently built into Kansas City's system because they saw his skill set, or if it's just his natural playmaking. Like, hey, we're just calling man coverage. You're covering the outside receiver. Oh, by the way, you just made a play on the slot who's not even your guy. Does he just do that? Or was Kansas City saying, hey, you can play this technique the way you want to do it because we trust you and we know that you can make plays that other guys can't. So
pretty sure he just does that.
Yeah, I'll be studying the Rams defense quite a bit this offseason.
We were saying
this season
earlier this morning, just looking at our overall PFF season-by-season grades, Aaron Donald has probably surpassed J.J. Watt at this point in terms of being the best defensive player we have seen since we've been doing this.
I'm shaking my head because I can't believe it. We are 3 years removed from moving to the 0 to 100 system, where we took a whole day essentially to quantify J.J. Watt and be like, man, he was a plus 110 in our old system. How do we convert that to 0 to 100, and how do we make that math work?
He is so much better than anybody else that he, on his own, is breaking the scale that we are trying to implement because he is so far ahead. Where do you put him in that system? And the idea was, what do you do about that? Because so sooner or later at another position, a guy is going to come along and be a J.J. Watt equivalent. Only it turns out it was Aaron Donald coming along at basically the same position in terms of an interior defender.
Right.
And he is, we spent a couple of years trying to convince people that J.J. Watt was a legitimate generational talent in terms of he's not just the best player on defense in the league. He's not just one of the best players right now. He may be the greatest player to ever do this. And, these guys are not supposed to come along very often. The whole idea of a generational player is they come along once in a generation, not once every 2 years or whatever the gap between Watt and Donald is.
We could still call them generational because
they both are. I mean,
there's nobody close to either of these guys.
They're both generational players that just happen to have come along basically in sequence. But J.J. Watt owns 3 of the top 11 single-season grades we've given any player at any position since we've been doing this. Aaron Donald also owns 3 of the top 11 single-season grades. And sort of every sequential year of Donald is just a little bit better than Watt.
And in fewer opportunities for Donald as well. So, yeah, unbelievable. We continue to try to quantify how great Aaron Donald is, and that's just another way of adding perspective. Let's stay in the NFC West, because I put in my piece early winners of free agency on ProFootballFocus.com. San Francisco 49ers, another team. I'm not saying every move that they made was perfect, but when you look at the Richard Sherman deal, which I do believe by all accounts is certainly a team-friendly deal for a Pro Bowl caliber cornerback with a perfect scheme fit and a chip on his shoulder, because the chips on your shoulder, when you have lays laying on your shoulder, it's very important.
They are just, the chips on his shoulder are racking up. Not only does he want to go out there and beat the Seahawks twice a year, now he's pissed off because everybody's calling him an idiot for doing his own contract and getting a low-ball deal.
So he has to hit every incentive on this contract to make it worthwhile.
He has, I can't remember what the figure was, but he has multiple millions tied to making the Pro Bowl this year. And a Twitter account with more than 1 million, I think, followers on it. Can you imagine the campaigning Richard Sherman is going to be doing come November for the Pro Bowl?
Oh, I know.
He is going to be retweeting every positive number in relation to Richard Sherman, anything that his name is in.
How often will he be DMing you and texting you, Sam, too?
Oh, I'm hoping we don't pin many touchdowns on him.
Don't worry about it. But they also add, so Weston Richburg at center, probably the best, one of the best interior offensive linemen on the market. Again, it's a health risk, and I've been saying about way too many of these free agents. If this guy can get to his 2015 level, which is 2 years, we're 2 years removed from that,
which is like the draft class as well. Nobody was good last year.
What's going on?
I don't know.
It's just weird. But I mean, the players do that. They go up and down sometimes. So Weston Richburg had an 86.5 grade in 2015. I believe that was his second year in the NFL, and it's another one of those guys who looks like this career trajectory. In year 2, if you put up a massive grade like that, you should be moving forward and things are great. But he regressed a little bit and battled injuries. But if he's healthy, excellent fit for the scheme, and a good player at a position that just didn't have a lot of good players on the open market. And then Jerick McKinnon, I know you like the fit here. It might be a little bit rich for the contract, but a good fit for the Kyle Shanahan system.
Yeah, somebody was making an interesting point that they almost have to overpay people because of the tax situation in California.
Yeah.
So you compare California taxes to Florida taxes where there's no state income tax, and it's a massive swing in money. So in order to get the free, plus San Francisco, not the cheapest place to live in the world as far as I understand it. So you almost have to pay these guys a premium to get them there, because otherwise they're losing more money comparatively than they would be if they signed in Miami or wherever. It's interesting when you look at a league that is, monitored by or controlled by a salary cap where everybody essentially has the same kind of money to spend, yet you're talking about completely different situations in terms of living expenses.
Very uneven.
Yeah. So a team like the 49ers may just have to end up paying a free agent premium anytime they want to go get a guy, because it's going to cost that guy more to live there.
It's a really good point that I think goes overlooked sometimes. Ultimately, though, when he gets on the field, I think he'll be okay. Pretty good player there. I don't think he's not going to be the workhorse guy, but he could catch the ball out of the backfield, good for the zone scheme. And Kyle Shanahan, I don't know the exact quote, but I saw this float through my timeline, essentially admitted that you have to overpay free agents in general, whether in California or not. But the thing he was saying was that when you overpay for a guy, you want the guy that works hard and is going to be a leader, and all because your teammates are looking to that guy, and it's like you paid that guy money. So from a culture standpoint, it sounds like they're okay with putting the investment into McKinnon because they know he's going to work hard and be a good teammate, and all the stuff that we don't quantify here at PFF.
I'm really interested to see how he does this season, because last year was just such a career year for him, and he was fantastic as both a receiver and a runner. And he'd only ever flashed bits and pieces in the past. And it wasn't for lack of opportunity. The Vikings gave him the ball plenty. They wanted him to become the player he was last year, and it just never really happened. And then really, once they gave up on him, they drafted Dalvin Cook, who ended up getting injured. They brought in Latavius Murray, and McKinnon was really an afterthought in that backfield until Cook went down, and he had to become more of the guy again, and just had this fantastic year. I'm just curious to see if he can back it up. If that was some kind of moment for him, a transformative season. If he can actually kick on and become that player again, or if he goes back to being the guy that looks like he has potential but never really displays it on a consistent basis. Because I do love the fit within that offense, and he is a complete player in terms of being able to do everything. So if you get that guy again, I think it'll end up looking like a good deal, even though it is rich money. But if he regresses and goes back to who he was before that, then it's a huge amount of money for a guy who's not even close to justifying it.
Right, and good use of transformative. I like that we're throwing that back into the vocabulary first. I want to discuss the Niners defense briefly because we're talking about a team that was just depleted from talent the last couple of years. But in the last 3 years now, they've added DeForest Buckner in the draft in 2016, first rounder. We loved him. 90.4 overall grade last year in the second year of his career. Rubin Foster, once he's out of jail, unbelievable linebacker. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with him, all the stuff that he deals with off the field, but when he is on the field, he is unbelievable. 3-down linebacker. Now you have Richard Sherman on the back end. So you're talking about stars at each level now. And I'm such a huge fan of Ahkello Witherspoon, who will be playing, I believe will be starting opposite Richard Sherman. They got him in the 3rd round last year. We saw him as at least probably a high-end 2nd-round type of pick, 6'2" with great movement skills. I just love how they've slowly added pieces to this defense. Even Solomon Thomas last year, I don't know that he was worth, was it 3 overall last year? But if they do use him in that Michael Bennett role that you've always been pushing for him rather than just on the edge or just at nose like he played at Stanford, they can get a lot out of him. I just like the way the defense is shaping up now.
There is a lot of talent on this defense now, and they're just short of a couple of key areas with the draft upcoming, so they're in a good spot to do it.
Absolutely.
They desperately need that edge rusher.
Right.
We said we were concerned last year, they basically drafted the same guy 3 years in a row in terms of
like a 3-4 end / 3 tech type of body type of player.
And we were trying to figure out how you were going to get all 3 of those guys on the field at the same time, and they really weren't able to do it in a way that maximized all 3 of them. The way they ended up doing it, now you're in trouble because you dropped your pen and you're on camera.
I dropped my pen, and now
you're not going to be able to move because they'll see that you did a stupid thing.
We're not professional yet, right?
That scratched the surface.
We're scratching the surface on professionalism, so I am allowed to get my pen.
I'll talk, and then the people just listening will have no idea.
I'm glad we stopped to discuss what I'm doing.
Only the YouTube people will know.
Hey guys,
that you're doing
I got my pen.
So the only way they were able to get all 3 of those guys on the field at the same time was to basically ask Solomon Thomas to be an edge rusher, which he just isn't. It's not what he does the best.
That was part of our scouting report. A lot of people they were calling him edge 2 behind Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
And we were like, no, he's just not that explosive, great edge like a Myles Garrett or even a Derek Barnett who was in the same class.
So I think they understand that now. They want to move him back inside. Whether I don't know what that looks like because you still have the same problem of essentially having 3-4. If you look at Sheldon Day, who they acquired during the season, 4 3-technique type players. It's a hell of a rotation if that's the way they go. Right. Alternatively, somebody is sitting on the bench barely playing despite being a very good player. But they're in a good position to be able to target a good edge rusher in this draft, maybe the top edge rusher where they sit in the top 10.
Harold Landry, Bradley Chubb are the 2 guys that we've highlighted. I know people are talking Chubb going top 5. We'd feel more comfortable with him maybe in the 10 to 20 range, so it could be a good fit there.
What was your tweet about Chubb compared with another
defensive
player?
I was trolling a little bit. But trying to make the point. And also reiterate my love for Derwin James of Florida State,
who is
his position is anywhere he damn well pleases. Okay, that's his official position per PFF. I called him a better edge defender, pass rusher.
Yes,
better pass rusher than Bradley Chubb.
Okay,
I was being a little facetious, but it's one of those things where if it works, like there could be a point in his career where he's just like this menace off the edge as a blitzer, and I'll be able to back it up.
There is something to the idea that in obvious pass rushing situations, you could easily have a defensive back lining up on the edge because at that point, the only downside is essentially if they run the ball. In terms of actual strength, it doesn't matter. All you're doing is trying to get to the quarterback with speed.
But you still need some level of pass rush move. And
they need the skill.
Power
they need the skill to do it.
Right.
But in terms of there's no real downside to having a guy who's athletically capable of doing that stuff, knows what he's doing, coming off the edge at 200 pounds. It's not a problem.
Right. And this is got to know where the PFF perspective is too. We don't care that much about how a guy loses. Mm-hmm. It's about how often do you win. And that's the way we've quantified these things through the years, because everybody loses. Everybody loses 85 to 90% of the time. And how badly you lose as a pass rusher really doesn't matter that much unless you just end up on the ground and you lose contain. But how you lose doesn't matter.
And this,
it's how often do you win.
This, by the way, is why I think that Shakima Griffin, the UCF kid with one missing hand, is an edge rusher, despite being 210 probably pounds. Like, he weighed 226 at the combine, packing some extra weight around the midriff, should we say?
The problem with him, I think, compared to Derwin in general, is can you create power? And everybody goes back to this Derwin James video / GIF of him destroying the Florida right tackle when he was a true freshman. That was speed to power. That was speed to power that, like, Myles Garrett creates.
Yeah.
But Derwin's creating it at 215. That's why I was half joking saying that he's better than Bradley Chubb, because, again, I just don't think Bradley Chubb is that elite top 5 type of edge.
I mean, I think Griffin can do that stuff as well. I just think that, so even though he is essentially a defensive back's body, and they're probably going to end up putting him at linebacker, I think he's an edge rusher. I think that's by far and away what he does best. And I wouldn't have a problem with him being a situational edge rusher and then figure out what he can do on base downs, even if it is a different position.
Right.
But use him as an edge rusher, even if he is only 220 pounds.
See, I think the best use for those guys is you get 2 other traditional edge rushers that you trust, and then the Shakima Griffins, maybe Derwin James. This is how Jamie Collins was used. They become the movable chess piece, right? They become the guy. When you have guys that can beat tackles at the college level that are small, you allow them to be more blitzers at the NFL level, and you isolate them on running backs. If they were beating tackles in college, they will absolutely beat running backs.
Yeah.
So now, if they're athletic enough, they become the guy that's the A gap, the double A gap. Hightower does it a ton. Yeah, absolutely. So now you're taking a guy that can beat tackles. You're isolating him on a running back as a blitzer, and he becomes the 5th rusher, or you've got some zone blitz opportunities, or you can drop him into coverage because he's athletic enough. That's where I think those guys are most valuable with a nice creative defensive coordinator.
Yes, and that's the key there, is the creative part. The problem is there's only X number of teams in the league that are prepared to get that creative. I think those guys fit in a defense that is, almost purely vanilla. You just have to be prepared to use a guy that's 220 pounds on the edge on 3rd and 15. There's no downside to it. You might as well put him out there. And if he's good at that, that's a valuable thing. It may not be, first round valuable or whatever, but it's a valuable role player to have in your defense.
Yeah, completely agree. It's a good discussion today, Sam. Yeah. Just a philosophical NFL discussion.
But on the back end there, the 49ers have also got a lot of talent. They added Sherman. They have some slot players. Gawan Williams has played extremely well in the slot for us in the past. Witherspoon, like you said. If they could add a defensive back in the draft, in fact, really, they could afford to add one player at each level of that defense in the draft, and it would immediately become a really good unit. They find an edge rusher in the first round. They need to find one more defensive back and one more linebacker, assuming, like you say, Rubin Foster does stay out of jail.
Assuming he's there.
Then you're in business.
Back. Out of his dang mind, as one of our friends would say. All right, let's move on to a couple other teams that we think they're doing some things this offseason. Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not ready to declare them straight up offseason winner, because anytime I think you lose Marcus Peters, no matter what the reason was, there's a step back on that defense because of all the turnovers that he can create and how much of a game changer he is. So even though they bring in Kendall Fuller from Washington as part of the Alex Smith deal, which I think was a fantastic deal for the Chiefs, still a hole at cornerback for the Chiefs. But I like what they're doing on offense. I think they have a chance to maximize Sammy Watkins' ability. I think his fit, he's only 24 years old. He's had some ups and downs in his career. But another guy, if he can get back to that 2015 level, all he did at 2015, 86-ish, 87.5 grade. But he's the deep threat. And, a lot of times being a deep threat is dependent on your quarterback. That season paired up with Tyrod's best year, throwing the deep ball. You had Goff last year, who was a little bit better at the short and intermediate stuff. So now, Sammy Watkins with Patrick Mahomes, who's got a good deep ball, has no problem chucking it deep. But more importantly, opposite Tyreek Hill and that level of speed, and with Travis Kelce stretching the middle, this is such a dangerous offense now.
It is, and it was dangerous last season without some of those pieces in place. With Alex Smith at the helm, Mr. Conservative, it became a dangerous offense. I don't love what they've done on defense. Anthony Hitchens, I think, is a good player to add, but they need a replacement for Derek Johnson, who was an excellent coverage linebacker at his best. Hitchens and Ragland are too similar to me, and they're too one-dimensional in the wrong dimension for today's NFL. You need a guy to be able to cover the middle of the field. You need a guy that can go one-on-one with tight ends, or at least squeeze zones in the middle, and I don't see either of those guys being able to do that. They will be able to come up and stuff the run like few other linebacker duos in the league, but again, it's not where the value is right now.
You've been getting on me for just harping on positional value left and right. You're all about this. Forget about the run, NFL. It's all about coverage.
Well, how many run-stuffing linebackers do you need?
One.
Yes.
Maybe.
Now they have two.
Yeah, that's
one
a lot.
too many.
That's a lot. No, I'm with you on that. And
also, they still desperately need cornerbacks. I mean, they added one and then sent one away. So
cornerback's still a major hole. It was always going to be a major hole, even if they had, or at least a need, even if they had Marcus Peters. I also, Tamba Hali, he gets released, potentially retires. We'll see what happens with Tamba. But he wasn't even on the field much last year. Frank Zombo's taken most of the snaps. D. Ford has never really established himself as a dominant edge defender. You're talking about Justin Houston on one side and a question mark on the opposite side.
And even
you
Justin
need somebody
Houston
else.
Is an injury concern at this point. He's been pretty banged up.
Yeah, so look, I think I like a lot of the moves that Kansas City made and what they were able to, like. I just like the Watkins move for what it's done for their entire offense.
So
the defense has
the
questions.
offense is now very dangerous. The defense is basically three guys and a bunch of problems.
Yeah, sounds right.
That's not ideal. They did, however, sign Dustin Colquitt to big money, so Super Bowl.
So he had that special picture made? Is that what it was? His agency?
That was his agency. They were doing it for everybody, though. I just found it funny that there was a punter sitting on a big bag of money.
Man, punters, there's only 32 jobs in the world, Sam. It's a valuable job if you're good at it.
I mean, he made multiple millions out of hoofing a ball down the field. I just think kudos to him.
That's what the Colquitts do. The punting Colquitts. Let's discuss the Green Bay Packers because I added them into my piece, even though this is a high upside offseason for the Green Bay Packers.
Mike is going to hate you when he gets back.
If they can get 2015 Mohammed Wilkerson and 2015 Jimmy Graham.
Wow. Is it even 2015 Jimmy Graham?
2011 Jimmy Graham. Look, so the Mohammed Wilkerson deal, 1 year, $8 million, and he's 2 years removed from being a top 10 interior defensive lineman. We talked about this the other day. Is it an effort level thing? But you do pair him with Kenny Clark, with Mike Daniels. This could be unbelievable for the Packers. The payoff could be huge, and it's a 1 year, prove it deal. That's a great thing to do for a guy that you think has effort issues.
Yes, it is a good deal, and it is high on upside, but it's risky. We are now 6 years from Mohammed Wilkerson's best year, which I think was his second year in the league. Like, he came in, looked pretty good as a rookie. Second year was phenomenal. He was that guy who you're saying, if J.J. Watt wasn't in the league, we would be talking about him as one of the best players in the game. But because he is, he just looks like somebody's poor sibling. He just can't look up. He's like Danny DeVito to Arnold Schwarzenegger in Twins. You're the poor guy we don't really pay attention to because look at this. That was Wilkerson that year. And he's only been kind of okay since then. Like you say, it's 2 years since his best play, and those 2 years have been pretty crappy. He is a guy that he was always trading on versatility. He would move all the way around that New York defensive front. And our man Austin Gayle, or the big mustache, as we call him these days, after his little video performances.
He stepped in for me.
He did. And he brought some mustache game.
He did. It was dirty looking mustache, but
yeah, But he came up with a good number. Mohammed Wilkinson, over the last 3 years, his total pressure numbers have declined as his snap alignment on the edge has declined. So the more they've used him inside, and it's a dramatic thing. Not just it has declined significantly more than the percentage difference between just edge pressure and interior pressure.
Right, because you're normally going to get more pressure off the edge anyway. But it's a steeper drop-off.
Yeah, it's a much steeper drop-off than that. So while we used to think of Wilkerson as this incredibly versatile player who can play all around the line, maybe actually turns out he really is more of an edge rusher, period. And that was always the thing that he didn't look that great at.
But the results were there.
Well, to a degree. The grading was never actually that good other than that one season where I think he actually did play significantly more inside. Now, I don't know what you're left with. Are you really just left with a guy who needs to play outside and isn't actually that good outside, and we just still talk about potential forever?
I still think he's a guy that can move around. I do like the idea that if you do have Mike Daniels and Kenny Clark on the interior, maybe you line Wilkerson up on the edge a little bit to push the pocket. That's what the Jets were doing. The Jets had him, Sheldon Richardson, and Leonard Williams, and it's like three long, similar body types. How do you get them on the field? So you see Wilkerson and Richardson would end up rushing off the edge.
Well, this was the same. This is what the 49ers did before the 49ers tried it. Like, they're now the second team in a few years to give a shot of, we'll just get four of the same guy and try and get them all on the field at the same time, and it doesn't work.
Well, the Niners had to do it. Theirs was more of a scheme change, too. I think the Jets were like, let's just get Leonard Williams, even though we have the same exact guy.
This is where the
Wilkerson.
Best player available thing breaks down. But at some point it doesn't work.
No, because you have to look long term, because now the Jets don't have Wilkerson anymore, and they're left with Leonard Williams, who is still an excellent player. They have
but
the guy.
They only don't have him anymore because he became superfluous. Like, or you could have just invested in him, not brought in Leonard Williams, and maybe you would have been better off because you'd have brought in an edge rusher who could actually play on the edge and get legitimate pressure out there.
They knew we had these effort
still
issues.
Tie down the guy.
They didn't want to tie him down.
Maybe. I'm just saying, best player available is a nice idea in theory, but you end up with four of the same guy, you've got some problems.
Well, now you've got Wilkerson, Clark, and Daniels on the same defensive line. You get Clay Matthews and Nick Perry as edge defenders, and I think with Wilkerson, I think you can move him around and get some value out of him. Jimmy Graham, like the fit with Aaron Rodgers, the whole back shoulder game, the fade game, the red zone stuff. Does Jimmy Graham have anything beyond that for the Packers?
I don't even know if he has that. I mean, so we're going to find out this year, I think, what Jimmy Graham has left in the NFL, because if there's a quarterback that can get the best out of his skill set, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. Last year, I mean, he wasn't a good fit in that Seattle offense. What they like to do is not what he does well, which is basically be a red zone mismatch right now. And that's all he was doing there. Even when you look at his deal with New Orleans, that big contract deal where is he a slot receiver, is he a tight end? Even if you look last year, he scored 10 touchdowns. Only 2 of them came when he was in the slot. He wasn't a slot weapon anymore. He just became a guy who was a freaky body type that you had to try and match up with in the red zone. Now, it's interesting with Green Bay because you're going to see a guy like Rodgers who loves to throw back shoulder, usually passes down the sideline to Jordy Nelson now he's gone, but he's also well capable of doing that in the slot down the seam as well. So while Drew Brees used to use him and just kind of put the ball up and over the guy trying to cover him down the seam, use him as a vertical seam threat, Rodgers might try and do the same thing except hit him with the back shoulder stuff and taking advantage of similar traits but in a different way. Alternatively, you might just see a guy that really can't run that way anymore and is only a red zone threat, at which point $10 million a year is pretty steep.
So he's just a bigger Jordy Nelson at this point.
Jordy Nelson from last year, yeah.
Yeah.
I.e. the guy that can't really run and gets cut.
Can't run a whole lot, more of a possession guy, that whole thing.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Which is fine. So even a possession receiver has enough speed to be a possession receiver against corners. The problem is when you're a possession receiver at tight end, it means you're physically incapable of separating from anybody. And the only thing you can do is catch the ball if it happens to be in your general vicinity.
Yeah, Rodgers is going to make him good.
It's going to be interesting to see because I don't think it's the same as a Jared Cook situation where Rodgers made Jared Cook look like the player that everybody thought he was going to be because Cook can run. Like his athleticism and speed has never been his problem. It's, relative inability to just catch a football when it hits him in the hands.
I'm more worried about Graham maybe at the end of the contract. I think early on it'll pay.
Yeah?
It'll pay dividends.
Okay.
Chicago Bears, another team. I did not add this into my piece, but I think they've done some good things. The priority had to be improving the playmakers. They get Allen Robinson, who's a nice fit. Overpay for Trey Burton, but it's, again, one of those things, once you get him on the field, are you going to be able to get enough out of him?
I like that deal, though.
I know you do, right?
Yeah.
So we gave it a low grade, or in the C range, C plus, or whatever it was on the site.
Yeah, so it's a lot of money for a guy who's basically never played.
So that's why it has to be a C, because there's just this inherent risk involved, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it does pay off.
It's a deal that is predicated on the idea that he is a significantly better player than he has been allowed to show so far.
There you go.
Which is risky, because if it turns out you're wrong, you look like an idiot. But I mean, if you're right, it looks like genius. It's like if you gave Cameron Wake a contract, after those first couple of years when he was just a situational guy, played a couple of hundred snaps, was making Joey Porter look terrible,
risky
by replacing him.
But genius.
It would have been risky, but you would pay off dramatically. You would lock that guy down long term, and as soon as you gave him the starting spot, he looks like a star. I don't think Trey Burton is going to be like a tight end equivalent of Cameron Wake, in that he's not going to become the best tight end in the league in any kind of hurry.
Right.
But I think he could be a pretty good dynamic pass-catching tight end. And I think Adam Shaheen, who they got last year, is going to quickly become more of a blocker first, and a guy who can play in 2 tight end sets, but is not going to be...
He's a big athletic mismatch guy too, though.
Kind of. He's big, and he moves well for a big guy. But this is like the conversation we had during the combine when everybody was talking up the speed index or weight-adjusted 40 times, where...
Oh, by the way, the PFF forecast guys laid into...
Excellent. Well, I'm about to do the same
They
thing.
laid into it.
So my point was,
a couple episodes ago,
it is an inherently stupid thing for people that have the ball in their hands, because, okay, your 40 might be significantly more impressive if you weigh 250 pounds compared to the guy that runs 200, but if you're still getting run down by the linebacker, I don't care that you move well for a fat guy.
Right. At some point, speed.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and the same thing is true for Shaheen. He is huge, and he moves really well for a guy that's like 270 pounds. But if you're not moving better than the linebacker or defensive back covering you, then why does it matter?
I think
all you're doing is being covered and being in, at that point, you're back to being Jimmy Graham and being a guy who just wins at the catch point.
I think the biggest example of overrating something a big guy does, and trust me, I know it's not easy doing athletic things.
You move pretty well for a big guy.
Thank you. I appreciate you finally admitting that, because you always
unless
make fun
you're
of me.
backpedaling, because that's ugly.
For a big guy, though, I'm pretty good backpedaling.
No. Even for a big guy, the backpedal is bad.
We'll work on it. Always room to improve. Deion Jordan, though, a couple years ago when he came out, everybody was enamored with him. Coming out of Oregon, he's 6'7", and it was like, this 6'7" guy, look at him in coverage. And it was like he was good for a 6'7" guy in coverage.
Yeah.
It didn't mean he was good in coverage.
But really, he's just an edge rusher.
Right. And he's really an edge rusher, which he's only okay at. So just because he's good in coverage for 6'7" and an okay edge rusher does not make him a top 10 pick.
Yeah. So
you'd rather have an elite edge rusher or an elite coverage guy, not a guy who's good for his size.
Yeah. So I think Shaheen is quite quickly going to become a blocker who can catch some passes as opposed to a legitimate number 1 tight end, at which point it becomes shrewd to find a guy that can be a legitimate move tight end, matchup weapon. And now you have 2 pretty good tight ends.
Oh, I can't wait.
A limited one.
I can't wait to watch it with Shaheen and Burton, and then Allen Robinson on the outside. They bring in Taylor Gabriel, and he could do a little outside, a little bit in the slot as far as his shiftiness and route running and all that fun stuff. And then, the big question mark, of course, that's Kevin White, and will they bring him back even, and will he even be ever be able to live up to anything close to his first round
I think
height?
maybe the biggest thing they did, though, was retain their secondary. Their entire cornerback stable was essentially hitting free agency at the same time, having come off a year in which they all played pretty well. They got Prince Amukamara back on a relatively long-term, decent deal. We've been saying for ages, this guy is actually a pretty good corner. I mean, solid. He is a solid starting cornerback.
That's extremely valuable.
It is.
Yeah.
And for some reason, he was only ever able to get 1-year prove-it deals endlessly. Right. So the Bears have finally given him credit and locked him up a bit, and they brought Kyle Fuller back, who finished last year on fire, looked fantastic. I think that was a huge move for them, getting those guys, retaining their own players. And
I would still love to see them in the draft if the right corner falls, take a shot on another guy, because we know, we just talked about the value of the slot corner, but you can never have too much depth in that secondary. That was big, though. I think if they went into the draft without Fuller or Amukamara or with only one of them, then it's like, all right, may have to force our hand and really take a corner. It does really open up their ability to maybe grab an edge defender and not have to worry about the secondary as much.
Yep.
So the Bears are in a good spot. I like what they're doing. I like the weapons they've added from Mitchell or Mitch Trubisky, whichever one decides to show up next year.
Which is the good one?
I think it's Mitch. I mean, again, I'm not getting behind Mitchell.
No,
as a franchise quarterback. I'm sorry. It's Mitch. Can we change it in the database? I think they made us move it to Mitchell. Let's see, Mitch L. I believe it's in his. Yeah, it's Mitchell in our database. I'm going to make a move to try to change that. I'll go up to the IT department on the second floor here.
You're not allowed to talk to IT anymore.
I have been cut off from talking to IT. That is a real thing that happened.
You have to go through the proper channels if you want to make Mitchell disappear and be replaced by Mitch.
I hate this. We used to run this company, Sam. Now we're working with so many people. I get 6 people that have to go between me and CTO.
Yeah, you've been middlemen. The more people between you and the person you need to talk to, I think the company has decided that's a good thing.
Losing power by the day over here at PFF. Any other teams, Sam, that stick out?
Well, it's not a done deal yet, but if the Minnesota Vikings do manage to sign Sheldon Richardson, having apparently locked him in the building for the past 24 hours or so.
It's the best way to get a deal done.
That makes them really fascinating players. They've got Kirk Cousins in. They got the quarterback they were looking for. They bring in a guy, Sheldon Richardson, having just lost Sharif Floyd to free agency. His injury nightmare, his contract didn't toll. He became a free agent. But whatever, his kind of career was just derailed by this sequence of knee injuries. They needed a new 3-tech pass rushing defensive tackle to put next to Linval Joseph, to put alongside Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin. Richardson, I think, can be a special player in that area, even if he hasn't shown it for a while. Again, another guy. You go back to 2015, you get the star.
Another 2015 guy. That is the theme of this entire free agent class.
And the draft, like I say, the number of players whose best season was not last year, it was the season before, is amazing.
Royce Freeman, 2015.
And basically almost all of the linebackers were better in 2016 than they were in 2017. It's amazing.
Every player that I made you scout was better in 2015. We discussed Kirk Cousins and his contract and the whole situation quite a bit on the last podcast, so I don't want to get into it again. But I certainly think the Vikings looking up. Other teams I think that I just find interesting, I think the Dolphins. I mean, the Dolphins went for they lost all of their best high-priced players, essentially. They lost all their high-priced players, we'll say. And Ndamukong Suh, Jarvis Landry, both very good players. They lose Mike Pouncey. They release him, who had a pretty bad year last year, replacing these guys with guys like Albert Wilson and Danny Amendola, who are just solid, good players. But then you see like a Josh Sitton come in, and he's the best pass-protecting guard in the entire NFL. If you guys don't realize how good Josh Sitton is as a pass-protecting guard, and you guys have PFF Elite, just go through and go to the signature stats, pass-blocking efficiency, every year. Just go back all the way to about 2011 or 10, somewhere in that range, and just look where Sitton ranks every single year. It's amazing if you guys have Elite. So they're in this weird mix of like getting rid of a lot of good players, bringing in some, just some okay guys, and then bringing in a guy like Sitton. Where are they going to end up, the Dolphins?
I don't love the way that roster is shaping up. There's a dearth of talent on it. They're losing good players. They're bringing in guys like Robert Quinn, who hasn't been good for a while.
Right.
And guys that aren't cheap. It would make sense if you're bringing in guys that were at least saving you money on the cap, but it's not.
It's like they're rebuilding with veterans.
Yeah.
They're rebuilding with veterans instead of youth.
You remember a few years ago when the Colts tried to basically sign the 2012 Pro Bowl team in like 2015?
Oh, yeah. The Frank Gores and
didn't go that
Andre
well.
Johnsons of the world and everything, yeah.
Yeah, typically when you try and sign a whole bunch of players that were good a few years ago,
who was it? So
probably
it was
missed the boat.
It was Frank Gore, Andre Johnson, Trent Cole.
Yeah.
It was amazing. All these guys were just done.
Almost everybody they signed was like 2 years past the start of their decline.
I mean, Gore's been the same guy for 15 years now, but I mean, the other guys were in decline. So,
Can you explain to me what the Jaguars are doing? So I like the Andrew Norwell move.
Yeah, that's good
Smart
up front
move,
for the
shoring
D-line.
up the offensive line.
O-line, sorry.
They bring in Austin Seferian-Jenkins. They bring in DJ Hayden, who somehow has a market value above veteran minimum. They bring in Dante Moncrief, who is going on for his fourth year of about to break out. They re-sign Marquise Lee to pretty good money. They bring in Niles Paul, who just isn't very good.
Seferian-Jenkins I'm okay with. It's the receiving core where it just feels like kind of like the Patriots do this sometimes at certain positions. Like, let's just get 10 guys and see what sticks. It's really what it feels like with the Jags between Moncrief and Lee. You already have Alan Hearns on the roster. You have D.D. Westbrook on the roster, who we saw as more of a second-round pick. It goes in the fourth round. I thought he flashed a lot when he had an opportunity last season. It's really the see what sticks. at the wide receiver position. I do have to question the DJ Hayden move.
I don't understand that at all.
You're talking about this secondary, and this is why they should have drafted Marcus Lattimore last year, Marshawn Lattimore. This is why.
Because they were going to sign DJ Hayden the next year?
Yes. And this is why you take the best player available, Sam. Because
whatever prevents you from taking DJ Hayden.
If at number 4 last year they took Marshawn Lattimore over Leonard Fournette, you get Lattimore, Jalen Ramsey, and A.J. Boye in that secondary. I don't care. You make it work. You figure it out. Put Jalen Ramsey in the slot because George and Eric already said it's more valuable and we know we can cover there. Awesome. And then forget about Fournette. Who cares? You can get a running back as good as Fournette in the second or third round any given year.
Well, they did. I mean, this last year teams did. Kareem Hunt.
They did. They got Kareem Hunt. Grab the best players at premium positions. That's how you draft. That's how you do it. Give them credit for the Norwell deal. I like that on the left side. Maybe help your boy Cam Robinson out a little bit over there. And just have to question the DJ Hayden move.
It is amazing to me that his market value is, money, as opposed to just, you can come in. We won't stop you coming in the building, but we're not going to commit, substance to you being here. If you want to come work out and we see something, maybe we'll sign you to a contract. But I'm not proactively going hunting your services. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I hear you. Anything else, man?
I kind of like what the Jets have done, right? So they had a ton of money, and they didn't go crazy with it. They didn't go out. Well, they went hard after Kirk Cousins and came up short. So at that point, you're already on the back foot because the guy you wanted to get, the guy that everything was hinging on, is not coming in the building, at which point you immediately have to pivot, and you're almost certainly not going to have the same kind of ability to spend because all the other guys have gone. Every other player who was a big name, who was somebody else's first target, is already in their facility and signed, and you're now having to go to 2 and 3. But Tremaine Johnson, I think, is a good corner for them. He's a good corner, period, and I think he works well within that scheme.
Fit.
Yeah. So I like that as a move. I like this idea of bringing in Teddy Bridgewater and Josh McCown, right? McCown played okay for them last season.
Right.
Decent enough starter. As a guy who was there for a sort of worst-case scenario, is a pretty good player to have. And it costs them $10 million or something to do it in a league where Sam Bradford is getting $20 million on the off chance he might hold up for 5 minutes. Teddy Bridgewater, I think, is a really smart move. He is still only 25 years old. He always graded better than I think people gave him credit for.
Well worth the risk at this point, just to see.
And is supposedly healthy. I mean, I'm not just saying, is being given lip service to that, but the Vikings got him on the field at the end of last season. They at least thought there was a chance where they might need Teddy Bridgewater running into the playoffs.
Right. And
they put him on the field to kind of get his feet wet. So Teddy Bridgewater was a good quarterback for a couple of years, and was trapped in an offense that I think forced him to look worse than he was. And by all accounts was looking phenomenal in the sort of preseason before he went down and got hurt. I think for a 25-year-old guy, this is a guy who has legitimate franchise quarterback upside. And you still have the draft to come. So you can still take a rookie who you think will be your franchise quarterback of the future. It doesn't harm you in any way if it turns out they both are.
Yeah, 2 one-year deals for veterans like McCown and Bridgewater, not keeping you from drafting a QB.
No, absolutely.
Now,
so,
if they get Baker Mayfield at 6 overall, that's nice.
Well, the absolute worst-case scenario for them in terms of both these guys panning out is you take a rookie, he becomes a star right out of the gate, Bridgewater looks fantastic, and you let him walk in a year's time, and you end up getting what's the Americanism for compensatory? Compensatory? Is that how you say
compensatory,
it?
yeah.
Compensatory pick.
Compensatory?
Yeah. Compensatory pick for Bridgewater when he signs somewhere else for a massive deal.
We're all shaking our head over here.
Look, I can't be held responsible if you guys can't talk.
You're American now. Please,
it's St. Patrick's Day tomorrow. I can talk however the hell I damn please.
Paddy.
Paddy.
St. Paddy's Day.
Paddy.
Not Burger Patty.
It's a D, not a T.
One more team I want to talk about. New York Giants.
Oh, yeah?
Just some good, some bad overall, you think?
Yeah. They upgraded at left tackle by bringing in Nate Solder.
I think they had to overpay for him, given
so
the market.
That's a case of definitely more money than he's worth, but the difference between him and what was available and him and what he's replacing is colossal, so it's kind of worth it.
Solid tackle. I'm not going to trash the move. They had to announce that Eric Flowers is going to move to right tackle. That's just – it's not because – so they're not doing this because they think it's easier. because we hate when people say that it's easier. We detest that because it's not. It's just he has to do it because Nate Solder's coming in to play left tackle.
I just think it's funny the list of players that he has to face at right tackle this year, which is probably worse than any slate he's had to face at left tackle.
Of course it is.
Past.
Life's going to get more miserable for him if he has to be the starting right tackle.
Ryan Kerrigan twice, DeMarcus Lawrence twice, Brandon Graham twice, Cameron Jordan. They face the Jags, so Ngakoue / Calais Campbell. It is a horrible season to be playing right tackle for the Giants.
Still room to upgrade with Eric Flowers.
Yeah, they brought in Jonathan Stewart as well. I think that could be an okay move if they're improving that offensive line.
Stewart I still like Stewart, but you're like, there's so many 30-year-old running backs running around there where I'd still probably just grab one in the third round of the draft.
I think you can do that anyway, but Stewart can still play.
He can still play. I agree. They trade for Alec Ogletree, who we already said was a good move by the Rams moving on for him. Maybe he'll find something in a new system with the Giants, but he just hasn't been great over the last few years. So Giants making a few necessary moves and also some that don't necessarily agree with.
They're a team a bit like the Saints that have just been so bad at finding linebackers recently.
Oh, for a while, yeah. Well, they refused to.
Well, yeah, it doesn't help.
For a while.
Yeah, it doesn't help when you'll only draft a guy if he lives in a profile that hasn't existed since 2004.
Yep, that's it.
That's a problem.
Right,
having said that, there's a couple of them in this draft. So now's the time to find your 6'5", 250-pound linebacker.
But that can actually move though. It's not like just your big thumpers that you wanted it from the the 86.
I'm just saying if you're looking for that guy, this is the year to try and find him because they haven't been there for the last few years. Now there's two of them.
Go get your old school linebacker Giants. All right, that'll do it for us. We miss Mike.
Do we?
No, we don't.
No.
I think we're having a lot of fun without him. We're doing a great job. It was a banner week on the site because the last few weeks we've put PFF Premium back out there. Mm-hmm. People are loving it, getting some great feedback on that. Please go and check it out. It's all part of PFF Elite. If you can't do the Elite deal, at least get Edge because over these next few weeks, what you've already gotten, the draft guide, the free agent guide, the QB annual, which I'm going to tease right now. There is an update coming that is going to blow your mind with some of the stuff we've been working on both at the NFL and the college level as part of the QB annual. That entire package is a part of Edge. The entire Edge package is a part of Elite. What you get with Elite is that entire premium stats package, which is everything back to 2006, every single player, all of their games, all of their grades, and then that's going to get a little upgrade as well this summer.
Oh, yeah. We are redoing premium stats, finally. Premium 2.0. It's going to be better. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be the thing we wanted for the last 5 years.
It's like 5 years in the making.
Yeah. So. And also, with all those guides, you can get it for as low as $9.99.
Yeah, we did give that little
trick. We used to sell the
trick.
draft guide for how much on its own?
Last year it was $20.
So we used to sell the draft guide for $20 on its own. You can get the draft guide, the free agents guide, and the quarterback guide for basically $10 if you want to get in, grab them, bail.
So go check it out. Go to join.profootballfocus.com. It'll have all of those options on there so you can see all of it. And, thanks again for listening, guys. We'll be back next week. We'll do a little bit more of free agent talk, NFL talk, and, of course, we'll get back into our draft stuff that you guys have been loving. All right, guys. We'll chat next week.